I'd like to thank our very invested partners, our VIPs. This very invested partner program allows us to do special events like this. It's our highest level of sponsorship for the HBA. So thank you to Bell Bank, to Lemke Home Improvements, and to Radiant Homes for being our very invested partners for their unending support. Now, what I'd like to do is start on the left, and if you would introduce your who you are, your company, and how you're involved with the HBA, excluding the candidates. We'll get to you after we get around the room.
I'm Sam Caver, Hest and Homes, Chair for the Public Issues Committee.
I'm Mike Lemke. I own Lemke Exteriors, and I am on the board of directors as the treasurer for the HBA.
I'm Tom Spieth. I have Accent Kitchen and Bath here in Fargo. And I've been on the board of directors for many years here and served as president once. And I'm on the state board of directors right now on the ladder to be president in a couple of years.
All right, John Gogolin, more commonly referred to around here as Father Time because I'm the oldest guy in existence here.
For many hats still on the board of directors. I'm a senior life director at the national level. And I also sit on the Community Land Trust as vice chair.
I'm Bill Rothman. I'm the CFO for Chilhwater Group. I'm on the HBA board and I'm the public issues liaison for the board.
And Toby Christensen, Cameron Cost Tractor Construction owner, Moorhead resident, long time, business owner in Moorhead. I'm the former chair of the Health Plan Trust and Foundation here. And numerous committees over the years.
Brendan Garrett's with the Cass Clay Community Land Trust, and I sit on the Public Issues Committee.
Sam McDonald, Cass Clay Community Land Trust, and Public Issues as well.
I'm Elizabeth Kozel. I'm the Public Affairs and Education Coordinator at the Home Builders Association.
I'm Paul, and thank you, Elizabeth, for all your work on these different events. You put on a lot of them here recently. So with that, why don't we start with John and go ahead and tell us about yourself, and it's a 2-minute window.
Okay. So my name is John Hess, for those I haven't had a chance to introduce myself to yet. I'm a candidate for 4B. I don't know, you might say that on here. I guess I didn't look at what that says, which is rural Clay in Becker County, and now a chunk of North Moorhead, now too close for redistricting. So, but I'm so I grew up the 5th generation of my family's farm, just outside of Hurley, north of Moorhead there. So very invested in family farming issues. I work at M-State at the Community Technical College there in Moorhead. So community technical colleges are a big education, more generally, big focus of what I'm talking about here usually. And then I'm also a dad, a husband, and a homeowner in Glendon, Minnesota. So thank you all so much for the invitation to be here with you today. Like I said, there's usually a handful of issues that I talk about when I'm asked like what my priorities are, what I'm focusing on, what I were to focus on if I were to be elected. The first thing is usually fighting for family farmers. My dad is transitioning towards retirement. My brother's transitioning to take over the farm, which if you know much about agriculture, it's a huge undertaking. So he's trying his best through various state programs and federal programs and things to get access to the land, the capital, the equipment, the stuff he needs to actually do the farming. And it's a lot. It's hard. So a big focus of mine is just making that a little easier. Incentivizing producers as they're retired to kind of transition that land to younger producers, beginning producers. Expanding the beginning farmer tax credit in Minnesota, which is a great program we have that just makes it a little easier for those folks to get started. Introducing right to repair legislation, ensuring that folks can repair the equipment that they own, and then also fully funding our public schools to ensure that property taxes aren't spiraling out of control, and that they're fully funded so our kids can get world-class education. But yeah, like I said, I'm thrilled to be here today, and I'd love to get to know you all more and hear about your issues, housing issues, all that great stuff. So thank you for the invite.
Wonderful, thank you. Jim?
Jim Joy, currently the mayor of Holly, been the mayor for going on 6 years. Been on the council for 2 years, small business owner, own a gas station, had a pizza joint, sold that recently. Wife, and I have 3 kids. One's working as over at Sanford, and put my hat in the ring because I feel there's some overregulation of the government we need to take care of, and some things we're seeing. Keep small business alive, keep rural Minnesota alive, out of metro Minneapolis, what we're seeing down there. I also sell car wash equipment and chemicals. So, you know, between that company that I work for and then the company that I own, the gas station, you can see where different things come into my perspective, you know, of whether it's gas tax of $460,000 I paid last year, and we don't see much of that up here, or government don't us too much of what we should be doing and getting too much over regulations. That's one of my priorities to work on. Inflation is a big thing. Keeping Social Security, keeping retired Social Security people in their homes and not taxing them on their homes. I mean, I think that's a big issue. I'm very excited to be here. I want to learn more about your guys' side of it and what we're seeing. I hear more about regulations up here. Now in Holly, you know, I was just talking to somebody, being the mayor and stuff there, you buy a building permit, you go build your house. We don't have an inspector, and if you re-roof your house, you don't buy a permit from us either. So, and if you do a deck, you really don't have much to do. So we don't see as much regulation out there as you guys are seeing up here, but it's definitely something I want to learn about, because it's, you know, when I get down to St. Paul or get down to go in there, I want to work on making sure you guys have what you need to get things done, and, you know, things we can see in our smaller businesses. And each and every one of you guys just talked about how your small business owners are involved in business. And it's just things we need to see change. So thank you guys for having me.
Thank you. Lynn?
Well, thank you for having me also. I'm Lynn Halmrast. I'm running for Minnesota State House seat 4A. And I have 5 kids. My wife and I live in Moorhead. I'm a longtime Moorhead resident. As a matter of fact, my father-in-law raised Dad. Maybe someone you would know. I was talking with him last night and telling him what I'm doing today, and he said that he was president of Home Builders a few years back. He's 97 now, so, but he's an electrician, and he gave me a little insight into what you're about. I'm also a Young Comes crew member. Just to answer some of those questions, people look at me and, you know, I look familiar some of the time, and so that's usually what the connection might be. I worked with Moorhead Public Schools for 33 years. I also served as president of the union in Moorhead, the Teachers Union. I'm a licensed psychologist, and I have my own mental health practice, consulting practice since 1981. I'm running to make a difference in Minnesota, in Minnesota's future, to be a strong voice for Moorhead and St. Paul. My motivation comes from what I've seen happening across our state and in Moorhead. Events in daily life are troubling lately. I'm concerned about our high cost of living. I'm concerned about high inflation, as well as public safety with our increasing lawlessness and violent crime. Incidents of drug overdose deaths and rising mental health crises are also very troubling to me. My leadership experience throughout my career has made me a proven leader and a compassionate problem solver who is ready to serve the people of Moorhead. My intention is that I'll provide strength and leadership as a voice for Moorhead and St. Paul.
Thank you. Very good. Very good. Rob?
Thanks. Well, I'm Rob Kupec. Slightly different job change going on here. So I've been a TV meteorologist for the last 20 years. I've been in Moorhead 22 years. And in case you don't know, my wife is on the city council. She does not have the same last name as me. She said White is a much easier name to spell. I'm going to take Kupec. So more power to her for that. I have one son, he's grown, and so my proud braggy parent moment is he's a rocket scientist. So he's working in Seattle for Blue Origin. So that's my proud parent little plug there. These are pretty exciting times, especially I think on the Moorhead side of the river, and we've seen a lot of growth, more growth in Moorhead the last few years than previously, and it's exciting. And a lot of that has to do with you, with the home builders. We've seen great neighborhood growth on the south side. I want to see that growth continue to go on. And I think there's places where the state can be a good partner with you in ensuring that growth. All the projections are is that Clay County will continue to grow for the next 25 years. And that's exciting, but that's going to bring some challenges. Obviously, it's going to bring infrastructure challenges. If we have all these people showing up, they're going to need someplace to live. And that's also going to bring housing challenges, I think, to the area. And I think there's a lot of areas, where the state could be a good partner in doing that. And particularly workforce housing is going to be a big issue. We've got they're kind of that middle ground that sometimes gets a little lost. They're not the high end, they're not the low income, but they're going to need houses to come here to work and live. So that's an exciting area. I think we could do a lot of work in. Also, want to make sure that while Minnesota has more regulations, we do have some border regulations that are in place. And I want to make sure as much as we can make sure we're on an even footing with the North Dakota side so that we can continue the growth of Minnesota. Thanks.
Thank you. Dan?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for inviting me. I'm Dan Bohmer, a Republican candidate for Minnesota's Senate District 4. I was born and raised in Clay County, Oakport Township. I've spent my entire life living here, except for a few excursions off. The Army took me different places. I was in the military for over 38 years. I retired as a colonel. I built 2 houses in Moorhead, so I'm fully aware of the difficulties we sometimes face in getting things done on the Minnesota side of the river, and I'd like to make that easier. I purposely, obviously, I stay on the Minnesota side of the river because I want to, and I want to make sure that we make it equitable so more people want to stay over on the Moorhead side of the river. When I bring somebody in new to work for me, I'm a nuclear pharmacist. I've always encouraged them to live on the Moorhead side of the river, but invariably they have to buy a house on the Fargo side, which is unfortunate. Because you guys all know that we have an impressive regulatory burden and high taxes on the Minnesota side, and that's what drives people over there. That's what drives builders over there, because it costs so much more to build a house over in Moorhead than it does in Fargo. It costs more to live in Moorhead. In North Dakota, we have common sense regulations and relatively low taxes, and we don't find that in Minnesota, unfortunately. Past legislators have talked about border cities legislation to fix the inequity, but that's just a drop in a bucket and comes nowhere close to repairing things. And then all that does is just move the border. So if you do something in Moorhead, then it just pushes the border east. And so we need to come up with comprehensive controls. We look at the things that there's the frost level building requirements cause an increase of about $3,500 up to $3,500 or more to build a house in the Minnesota side of the river just because of that. And we need to address those things. So I hope to work with each of you guys to educate and be partners in getting solutions done. So I look forward to working and serving for this community down in St. Paul.
Thank you. Wonderful. Does anybody have any questions to start off? Anything? I know we have quite a few Moorhead residents in here. John?
One of the big things in the past, when we've been working with the legislature, has been, for anybody actually in an elected position, has been workforce. And one of the things we've been fighting for years is to be able to get high school students to be able to do like internships with us in the trade. As you know, it's been fun to see Moorhead get their career academy off the ground that are coming on this side of the river in about another year. And with that, if we just like the opportunity without a ton of burden to be able to get, say, 16-year-olds, on the job site, to get them a chance to experience the trades. And because it's been, I think all we're trying to do, and I'm probably a good example. I did go to a 4-year college to get a 4-year degree. And my first job out of college was pouring concrete, for estimating an hour a week and pouring concrete, the rest of it. But to give these kids a chance to determine whether so they make a good career choice when they leave high school. You know, we've heard a lot of talk about, student loan debt. Well, some of those kids would have been better served possibly going through a trade school, whether it's, I don't care if it's nursing, whatever the program might be. But just your thoughts on how we could, work to get that age limit lowered. There's some burdens with OSHA, between OSHA, workers' comp, and a few other things that some states have got a little bit more flexibility. It'd be nice to see that flexibility both in Minnesota and North Dakota if we could. We're working on it here too. So just your thoughts on workforce probably.
So, but it sounded like the age minimum issue was filtered
I
into
think that's,
that.
yeah, I think
In
that's the
Minnesota.
biggest thing.
Yeah, Minnesota does have a, I believe it's a, waiver, as does North Dakota for the age minimum, but the paperwork is crazy. So, thoughts on kind of what you could do to accomplish, maybe minimizing the paperwork, that sort of thing, and addressing the workforce. Jim, we'll start with you and we'll go all the way around and come back to John. Sorry, John.
So I don't have a 4-year degree. I went from high school right into a management role in the convenience store industry. So it's kind of interesting for me, sitting, I talked to a lot of different people that have 2 years. My daughter went to, when she was getting ready to go to school, we talked to her about what she wanted to do. And she was gonna go for nursing. She decided to become a surge tech, which was only over at M State for 2 years. And didn't have a lot of debt when she got done. And I encourage being an entrepreneur myself and doing things from where I've done things. I encourage a lot of people. I think the more heads in school with the TAP program is a great thing. In the convenience store industry, I run into the same thing with age restrictions because you gotta be 16 to sell tobacco in Minnesota. Not saying I want 14, 15-year-old, but with the workforce shortages, that's what we're running into nowadays. And as I think we just need to work down there in St. Paul, we talk about raising wages and we're gonna wage each other out. That's all we're gonna do, steal from each other. So we need to come up with some other sources and encourage more 2-year college, 2-year schools and stuff for kids, I think.
As I worked in Warren for a lot of years, I love seeing the tech school piece, added. Seems to be a huge new resource. It'll be fun to follow that along. But I also think about what is it that's interfering? What's interfering with being able to encourage and create some incentive for young people, to be involved in the trades. And there's been so much emphasis on academics, and I think that's not a helpful thing to a lot of our young people. And so to be able to work with administration and to be able to really take that problem more head on, and maybe that's going to happen, with the movement we're seeing. But I think it's a great question, and hopefully moving towards the trades is going to happen. As far as the money, there's more money in the trades than a lot of the academically kind of limited jobs. So, thanks.
Brad.
Sure. Yeah, and I think the Career Academy in Moorhead I think that's an example that we could spread statewide. I think a lot more places could get going with that. I was just talking with one of the teachers over there the other night, Jeff Schneider, who does small engine repair at the high school, and now he's moved over there. And he was telling me how, they had a bunch of the trade unions came in and gave a talk to the students, and they were touting all of the good jobs that were out there that you could go through and do that. And Jeff even said, he goes, if somebody had come to me when I was in high school and probably brought these things up, he goes, I actually don't know that I would have become a teacher. He said, I did not realize when I was in high school that there were all these opportunities there. So it's a really good way, I think, to get students involved in that. And if there are, paperwork issues, I'd be more than happy to look at trying to streamline that process. I think apprenticeships are a great way. I started basically my television career as an apprentice too in that. So on the job learning is really good.
Yeah, excuse me. I grew up, my dad was a contractor in municipal construction, worked for Dale Shires Moore Construction, and then a little Abbott Arnish, building water treatment plants and whatnot. And so I grew up doing that. He'd take us kids out on the job with him, probably shouldn't have been, but we did. That's what we grew up working. I was tying iron when I was 8 years old. Pouring concrete when I was 8 years old. But the thing is,
Planting the seed though.
it is, and it made me sure that I was gonna get a different job.
Well, that's good too.
But no, I think we need to encourage the trades, and we need to look at making sure our young people can get jobs, because those concrete jobs and stuff, they're good paying jobs. I mean, that's how I afforded to pay my way through college, is pouring concrete and working with my dad. A lot better than working at, delivering pizzas, because I can make a lot more money doing that. And if these kids had that opportunity to pay their way, earning some money to pay their way, then you could, like me, graduate school without having a significant student loan debt. And I think those trade programs, getting people out there working when they're younger, is a great way to do it.
John.
Yeah, so I obviously work at a community technical college, so I see firsthand, I advise HVAC students, plumbing students, electrical. I see, so these programs every year are full. Like every year, we fill every seat in these programs, and employers are scrambling for more. Probably some of you in the room are scrambling for more graduates of these programs. So what we need is some state investment in these trades programs to expand them. And I think as far as like the age piece specifically, some of that I know, like Bryce alluded to, comes down to OSHA and federal regulations and stuff. But I definitely think the Career Academy can be a great tool in immersing some of these students in these options they just wouldn't have thought about, like others on the panel here have said. People, you don't think about HVAC as a career option when you're 16 years old, or electrical or what have you. So just preventing more of those options, ensuring that, because they're going to graduate with a good paying job with little debt, like other folks have said. So as far as the 16-year-old piece specifically, I think, I think the Career Academy could kind of be a way around some of that, to some extent. Obviously, that might not help with the workforce piece right away, but down the line, I think it could. So, but yeah, it's great, challenging issue that we're all in. So.
And we're gonna start with Lynn this time. This is where it gets complicated, is trying to remember where we started. So feel free to tell me if I'm wrong. We'd like to know did you hear anything from the last session that you took interest in, that you would like to work on if you're elected?
The last.
Legislative session, the last Minnesota legislative session. Was there anything that stuck out in this last session that you would like the opportunity to work on? Or maybe a previous session that if the issue died, got put to bed, or?
Well,
Sorry.
it seemed like there was there was certainly a lot that didn't get done with the last session. If I'm thinking about to me the tax structure that Moorhead encounters to start with, and being a border city, those are issues that to me have more of a priority. Also, being able to create more of a level playing field. The regulations know that Moorhead is up against, in comparison to Fargo, continue to really impede just the development of new businesses. And when I talk with people and I'm out door knocking, they talk about, well, why don't we have more businesses in Moorhead, more restaurants? So why did Sam's Club have to be closed? I mean, those issues.
Right, perfect. Rob?
Yeah, sure. Well, for starters, we have a big budget surplus that got left on the table. That would have been nice money to either have for tax cuts that were included in that, some money in people's pockets to help with gas. And there was a lot of money for schools. And I think the state funding education is a big help, because when the state funds education, it levels the playing field. Not all communities have the same property tax resource base, and when the state funds it, then that lowers that property tax on individuals. The school property tax is the highest property tax, at least on my bill, that I've seen gone up over the last few years. So those are important. And also with that growth that we're experiencing, we're gonna be needing to build new schools. And we know in Moorhead, every time a new school pops up, and my son was in the first class at Reinerton, that school will be great for years. It was Reinerton and that little church across the street. And then after they built that school, boom, an explosion of housing. People want to live near their schools. And so those schools also drive housing and desire for neighborhoods to be around them. So they kind of go hand in hand.
All right, thank you. Dan?
Well, as far as the last session goes, probably the biggest issue that I'm aware of, and it doesn't have to do with the building, is just the long-term care facilities and the funding shortfall that they were faced with. And that all got left on the table along with the surplus, because the legislation just didn't get passed because of obstructionists, on one side or the other, a lot of finger pointing. But the bottom line is things didn't get done, and they walked away from this last legislative session without getting things done. And we have to do a better job of not doing that. We need to get away from the partisanship and people digging in their heels and just doing what their DFL caucus wants them to do, or what the Republican caucus wants them to do, and do what's right for their communities they represent. And sometimes that might be voting against what your caucus is advocating to get things done. And that's what I hope to do, is get down to St. Paul and work to accomplish common sense things. And at times that might not be, voting in lockstep with my fellow Republicans, but it's to get the job done.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, so the legislature left the single biggest tax cut in Minnesota history on the table last session. That was far and away the biggest miss. Representative Marquardt, our predecessor here in 4B, put together a fantastic tax bill that would have cut Social Security income tax. It would have provided tax credits for student loans, provided tax credits for childcare, would have put a lot of money back in people's pockets. They had an agreement in place, and Senate Republicans walked away from a deal. So with a $9 billion surplus, there's just no excuse not to pass that tax cut, which would have helped so many people in such concrete ways. The stuff others mentioned too is incredibly important, but funding public education absolutely would be my other big priority with that budget surplus. Taking care of our long-term care facilities, absolutely. But it's hard for me to look at that, that they had an agreement in place on a tax bill, and for them to fail to pass it because of obstructionism. I don't agree with that. I don't think it was one side or the other. The Senate Republicans agreed to it, failed to pass it. I don't know how you can get around that. So passing that tax that would help Minnesotans would be number one.
Thank you. Jim?
It's disheartening to me that we got nothing done last year with all the money. One of the problems we have down there is we get into omnibus bills. We get too many bills trying to build them, and then we throw them through at the last days of session. And then the agencies take over and write the rules for them. That's our job as elected officials, to write those rules. I know it's more work for us to do one bill on every bill, but we need to vote out that big bill at the end, and we need to do the work ourselves and follow it through right to the end of the bill. Because it goes from our table to the agency, then the agency puts in their words, and that's where it gets overregulated for people like you, when you guys are older, and that's where the fees come from. That needs to stop. And that's one of the things I'm looking forward to when I get down there. Is I've had conversations with representatives already that are in place that want to change this policy.
Thank you. Before I move on, Toby, you asked this question in the past. Do you want to ask about prevailing wage laws and how Minnesota?
I can try. So we have crews right now on 3 different projects that Davis Bacon prevailing wage rates are involved. We're on a residential multi-story, multi-family dwelling where none of our guys have to get a pay raise to do the job, because I think labor rate is really close to minimum wage. That's like $8.00. It's a North Dakota project. We're on 2 projects at the airport, and we're doing some building construction plus the paving, civil construction. So we typically have 4 classifications on our. We have concrete laborers, we have concrete finishers, carpenters, and equipment operators. On one piece of this job, the paving, I'm not gonna remember the numbers exactly. It's close to, labor on the building will be at $21 an hour. Labor on the civil or paving is like $30 an hour. The concrete finisher on the building is $38 an hour. The finisher on the commercial paving is $54 an hour. Sometimes we have to pay rebar tires, iron worker wages, which can get to $60 an hour. In Minnesota, we have to pay that. In North Dakota, we don't. They can get common labor, and we've been on jobs where they've been at $8 an hour. So the way they determine prevailing wage rates, through the Davis-Bacon Act is ridiculous, ludicrous, and it costs M-State, MSUM, any job, and we've done jobs on the tech college site where we've had to pay these out crazy wages on one hand and ridiculously low wages on the other hand. And it creates it's a overburden for our taxpayers. It makes a real challenge for small business owner to treat our employees fairly. Who gets to go make $55 an hour tying rebar? Who gets to stay doing it for 22? So any thoughts on how we can fix that?
So we'd start with Rob.
Sure.
All the way around.
Sure, and I think there are still some benefits to having a prevailing wage law. I think certainly for some of the workers, it's definitely a benefit, and there are some benefits to the taxpayer too. Studies have shown that when you do a prevailing wage law, a lot of those projects that are done under that, the quality of those projects comes out to be a little bit better. So there is a benefit to the taxpayer in terms of a higher quality project. Are there probably some places we could make some adjustments to that, like everything? Sure, there probably are, but overall, I think we get a better project out of that.
Well, when I was tying iron for my dad and stuff, I loved the Davis-Bacon because I love making those higher wages. But, so I'm the same guy tying iron, whether I was doing it over on this project or that project. And so I don't think my quality of work improved because I was getting paid more. I was just getting paid more and I was happy. In fact, I switched off my dad's crew to another crew to take advantage of the Davis-Bacon. So for a worker, it's great, right? But for a guy like my dad trying to keep track of who's doing what and, hey, you can't be tying iron because, I need to pay as a carpenter instead. It's a hassle. And so it's all these regulations, they're well-intentioned. You can't argue with that. People putting them in place, they have good intentions, but they fail to oftentimes, more often than not, look at the second and third order effects of what those overburdened regulations are going to lead to. And then they never correct for that. And that's where I think where we're at right now, where you have such a disparity in what's going on. And although well-intentioned, it's missing the mark. And that's what we need to stop.
Thank you, John.
Yeah, no, I largely agree with what Rob said. I mean, it's a challenge, and it's not always fair for the workers. I get that. You don't want to have it be unfair for folks just because they're on one side of the river or the other. But I also worry about, I worry about this race to the bottom sometimes. I think that's what it comes down to, is we don't want to drive down wages just to match the low rates that North Dakota pays. Minnesota is a high tax state, it's a high regulation state, and that can be a challenge sometimes, and I get that. But at the same time, we get a lot out of it. We get better roads and bridges, we get better schools, we get better stuff because of these taxes, because of regulations. Are there areas where we could cut those taxes, cut those regulations? Absolutely. But I think on the whole, throwing prevailing wage out the window would be a mistake. But I hear what you're saying. I know it can be a challenge on those projects.
All right, thank you, Jim.
I guess I'll echo what I said before, let's go over regulations again on these things. And, being the mayor of Holly, it surprised me every time we did something in Holly, we had to follow these rules and regulations. And is that a benefit to the taxpayers? No. These people that are out there working, like we just talked about, whether they come out of the 2-year degree and do stuff like that, they're making a good wage, and they're gonna be the same worker that makes $60 to the same worker that's doing that job if they don't get those bids. I think there definitely needs to be some old work in that regulations of that and change that, because I think we get too much, again, with the government telling us what we're gonna do in our business, and too much of this, and the city just bothered me when we went out for bids, and we always had to follow these guidelines and cost taxpayers more money, and it's like, I'm a small business owner, it affects everybody that's there getting assessed all the way across, so I think it needs to stop.
Thank you. Lynn?
I appreciated your detailed, question, and description, because I am, admittedly, not that well versed, with, a lot of the work, that goes into the building construction industry, but I'm a benefiter from it. But when I talked with my father-in-law, he was talking about the Davis-Bacon, laws, and just his explanation, talking about how as a businessman and as a business owner, that is a perplexing, just complicating piece of doing the work. I had a chance to tour the high school, and Steve Gertz is the project manager over there. Just visited with him a little bit afterwards and learning a little bit more just about how complicated and challenging this fluctuation in wages is, in that okay.
Oh, that's okay.
Can I just follow?
Yes.
Shortly.
Yep, go ahead.
So I'm not in favor of abolishing Davis-Bacon. My point is, it doesn't create a wage that is the prevailing wage of any area. It doesn't do that. That's evident because how different it is from one job on one type of job on the same project as the other. It's also evident from year to year. When I did a job at M State a number of years ago, and then I went up to the Moorhead Water Treatment Plant, the labor rate was 34 one year, 17 the next. That's not a prevailing wage for the region. That's my point. The way they determine the prevailing wage rate is ludicrous. It doesn't work. And that's what makes it not fair to the workers or to the taxpayers. I'm not in a rush to the bottom. I think all construction guys should make a fair wage and a living wage, and we're definitely in the top 25% of pays. And I want to stay there, but it's a real challenge to be fair when it's as ridiculous as it is.
Thank you, Toby.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna start with Dan on this one. What public service achievement are you most proud of? And if this is your first run at public service, something to be equivalent to that? Yeah.
Well, I'd have to probably, I spent a lot of time doing the Army thing, and I guess, that's probably, somewhat considered public service. So I graduated high school in Moorhead, didn't really know what to do. I knew I didn't want to go to college because I spent the last couple of years in high school just not being a very good student. And so I figured going to college just be a waste of money and time. And so I just did a lot of nothing and got in trouble. And then I decided I better change my life around, and I joined the Army, and it saved my life, quite honestly. And so that's what I'm most proud of. I enlisted in the Army, started off as an E1, retired after, like I said, 38 years as a colonel, last 7.5 years as in command. So being able to do that and all the things that I was able to do and achieve there is what I consider the greatest accomplishment in my life as far as in the public realm.
Okay, thank you. John?
Sure. So this is my first run for public office, so I don't have any of that stuff to fall back on, but probably what I would point to. So I've been an active member of Minnesota Farmers Union for a number of years, and as part of that, I was selected for this leadership training program that they do called the New Leader Academy, where I got the chance to deep dive in agricultural policy with folks from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, from the state government, the governor's office, all the way up to Congress, to USDA. So I got the chance to go and learn, and then turn around and use that learning to lobby for farmers, rural communities in the halls of Congress and USDA, which was a pretty cool experience. So and I would love to leverage that knowledge in St. Paul if I can. So.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yep.
I'll be the mayor for just about 6 years now, and being on the council for 2 years. It's been a great service. I was always planning to stay 10 years and then I'd move on to something different. I also sat on the police reserve, and I've been on the police reserve with Holly. because I wanted to understand what it's like with the law enforcement, riding with them, stuff like that. And I enjoyed that, and that was a great thing. Just we started a program in Hall here probably about 7-8 years ago, and got to ride along, learn them, and just understand the community and work with some of the Clay County sheriffs to understand it. And like I say, those 2 steps have been great for me. I also sat on the Legislative Salary Council down in St. Paul. I spent 4 years on that. And that was another eye opener to learn what, how legislators get paid and everything like that, since they can't do their own wage studies. We were appointed down there. So I've enjoyed all the intermingling of government so far. So thank you.
Thank you. Lynn?
Okay. I probably would see the opportunity that I had working, with young people in schools, kids of all ages, as being where I was able to have my strongest success. And in particular, I was called often to intervene with young people who were severely depressed, suicidal, and the number of incidents of that kind of referral was increasing dramatically. And so I was able to go to administration, and I asked them if we could do something about that. And so I formed a committee, and with that committee, we developed a crisis team, and then we developed a crisis intervention policy. And as we moved forward, that became not only a policy in Moorhead, but in many other parts of the state, and we trained others.
Wonderful. Thank you. Brad?
Sure. I've been on several boards for different nonprofit groups. And obviously, as a meteorologist, one of the things I've done a lot of is going out and educating kids and community members about weather safety. Probably in that realm, at least for me, the most rewarding thing was I worked with Lutheran Social Services for about 15 years for the New American program. And so they were coming here, and they had a variety of different people come in, talk about jobs, police, and I would come in and tell them about the weather. And they were all coming from places that were very tropical. And so that just the interaction of explaining like the weather here and how to prepare for it. The one mistake I did make early on was I forgot to, when I was talking about snow pants, to tell them that the snow pants went over the pants. And there was one student I heard from a teacher, hopefully it was not somebody who went to one of my orientations, but they showed up with only snow pants on because they thought that was the pants. So lesson learned on that.
So funny. All right. Well, what an interesting, that gives us such great insight on how you've come to today too. So very, very interesting. I have one more question. Does anybody have any other questions? I'm just watching the time, so we have closing time. Wait, your tongue over there or no?
No.
Okay. Okay, you're good. Okay. So thinking to the future, what issue is Minnesota going to be dealing with 10 years from today? And what can we as the HBA and our members do to help prepare and help you as elected officials? And I think we're going back to John.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's a great question. I mean, probably the obvious answer is something to do with housing, right? Given that that's your whole deal, or significant part of it at least.
Yeah.
But I think probably one of the biggest issues that I do see in the state is a lack of affordable housing and kind of, I think Rob had used the phrase, kind of that middle level housing. So I think in a lot of, especially like rural Minnesota, I think Far Moorhead's a little better positioned with regards to that stuff, but rural Minnesota, it's a struggle. I've seen even now, not even 10 years from now in Glendon where I live, folks trying to find rental housing. Good luck. It's, I think there's maybe 8 apartments in town total, like units, not buildings, and a handful of houses for rent. So just ensuring that, as you all, continue to do the great work that you do, the important work that you do, that you are thinking about and supporting state government in building enough affordable housing, middle income housing, so we can draw in both that, that workforce and keep that workforce in rural Minnesota.
Thank you. Jim?
I think the thing we're looking forward in 10 years here and looking forward, one, I want to get to know what you guys are looking for down the thing. But as I tour concrete plants and hear about fly ash coming to the end and a big thing for the concrete guys and doing stuff like that, that comes from our government regulations again, because we're shutting down coal plants, stuff like that. Those are things that are on the federal level, but I think Minnesota needs to be strong on advocating to look at what we're doing. I also heard a thing today up in Cohasset, they're looking at building an OSB plant, but they're having a lot of fight against it because of regulations again. And those are things we need to invest in Minnesota. We need to make sure we're doing it right. And we need to make sure we get the right people down there so we can do this right in 10 years and help you guys. And then you guys can work with us on what else we need to be doing. So.
Thank you.
I like the 10-year question, because it's hopeful, but I do believe that the issues that we're going to be looking at have a lot to do with, for us here and for Moorhead, this community, the border issue and being a border community, I think is something hopefully that's resolved by then, but it is, it's been a long time factor, and it's resulted in Moorhead being more of just a community for residents. It's called a sleeping, a bedroom community, that kind of thing. But I think the workforce issue is the other area, because when I look around, we can't find workers to come to our businesses, and try and go to a fast food restaurant even, and the shortage is so evident. And I'm thinking, what are we doing, to remedy that? So those are.
Thank you. Scott?
Sure, and I agree with Lynn too, the workforce issue is gonna be a big one. It's also as a meteorologist, it's fun to try to see other people predict the future. You don't really have to do that, so I appreciate that. I think the other thing too is long-term, not only long-term care, but senior housing. There are like 12,000 baby boomers a day now across the country moving into long-term care. And I know in Moorhead, we have a severe shortage of senior housing units that are one floor without stairs, maybe even to some of the condo type housing units that are easy for them to get around. And I always think the longer that somebody can stay in their house, probably the better out that outcome is for seniors. So we want to make sure we're staying in their houses. And that's a place I think where the state could work together with builders to help, offset some of the costs for maybe building some kind of structure that's not quite as lucrative, but is desperately needed in our community.
Thank you. Dan?
Yeah, 10 years from now. I think probably our biggest challenge is just the continuing urban-rural divide, if you will. And we see it up here all the time, greater Minnesota versus the Twin Cities area. And I think that's just going to grow worse, especially if we don't break this gridlock on the partisanship and saying, oh, it's all the Republicans' fault that we have the budget surplus issue not resolved. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we need to get away from, because it's not just one-sided. As much as your DFL talking point wants to point at that finger, that's not it. And so we need to get away from that. And we will continue to have this divide, this inability to get things done if we latch on to that kind of stuff. And that's our biggest problem. And if we continue to latch on to stuff, it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. It's going to get worse. In 10 years from now, we'll be in much worse shape than we are now. We need to get over that. We need to look at what's best for our area that we represent and stop pointing fingers and get to work.
Thank you. All right, we will, if everyone is good on questions, we'll put up closing comments and we'll start with Jim.
Okay.
And it's 1 minute, sorry.
Again, thanks for having me. I've been the mayor, you haven't been to a lot of these forums, but I guess once we put our hat in the ring for a bigger seat, we get invited to more things and more regulations and whatever we got to do out there. So been door knocking, been enjoying everything. Again, I appreciate it. And I look forward to sitting down with you guys and learning what your guys' struggles are being and what you're fighting out there and what we can do for you. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn?
Well, I'd like to help build a better Moorhead with lower cost of living and lower taxes. I will listen to you when you call me, because I do want to hear from you. I want to learn from you what it is that you need. I want to be a strong voice in St. Paul, advocating for mental health services in our schools and communities, along with standing up for our police and our law enforcement professionals, and working to simplify the regulatory burden that Minnesota builders face, as well as tax reform to help create a more competitive business environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
I think thanks for having me too. I should start with that. But yeah, I think the most important thing, you know, as a state representative you can do is making sure that when something comes up before the Senate, the House, is that you talk to constituents and groups that it would impact. So having that dialogue, having that conversation, I think is the most important thing. So I would certainly, when housing regulations or building regulations come up, I think getting input from all sides is the most important way to get that legislation that's good for everybody, to make sure that Minnesota is moving ahead, moving forward. The state, in a lot of ways, there's still some problems, but in a lot of ways is in a really good place. And especially, I think Clay County into Becker County, we're doing some really good things. These are exciting times, and it'll be exciting to be kind of a part of it and make sure that that growth continues.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, I promise you, when I get down to St. Paul, I'll listen and I will get things done. And I fully expect that to happen next year, that I'll be representing you there. What you see is what you get with me. I'm not telling you one thing just to make sure I get a vote. I'm consistent. I'm an open book. Anybody that knows me well understands that. I don't say one thing and do another. I mean what I say what I mean, and I do that. I'm willing to listen. I'm not rigid. I'm willing, I understand I don't have all the answers. And I need to listen, I need to learn, and I need to grow. And even though I'm 59 years old, I've never stopped learning, and I continue to do that. And I can assure you that I will make sure that I'm representing the Senate District 4, Clay County, Becker County, and the interests of our citizens here, and that includes our business owners. Because we need to make this the community, the area that we want to live in, and keep our values the way they are. So I look forward to working for you guys.
Thank you. John.
Yeah, thank you all so much for the invite. I hope as the first of many of these forums, I'll be able to hear from you all. We're losing a couple of really good, even-keeled, pragmatic legislators in Paul Marquardt and Kent Eakin. And I really, I know that we need folks to step up and fill a similar role, right? The partisanship is just on 11. It's a problem in St. Paul. And having folks who can go down and just be those kind of pragmatic deal makers, get things done for folks in their districts without, just rubber stamping their party's policies is really important. And so I hope that I can be that person for the folks in District 4B. And again, I'd love to see you all again at some point here. So thank you for the invite today, though.
All right. Thank you. Let's give her a round of applause. What a great. I want to thank you again for giving us your time. We do make routine visits to St. Paul. We usually have a group of between 5 and 10, sometimes 15 of us will go to St. Paul during the session and visit. We work with the Builders Association of Minnesota many times as well, and we'll participate in their St. Paul Hill Day, Builders on the Hill. So with the last 2 years, it's been virtual meetings or we just now in 2020 they didn't have it, I think, and 21 it was virtual. So it's been kind of quiet for us, but our intention is to get back into it and be down there. And there's nothing better than for the members, the constituents, to be down at the Capitol and to be there in person to get to visit with legislators. So that's such an honor to see the Capitol and all that. So I just want you to know we'll be looking for you when that day comes, and please use us for your election season as a resource. We have a study called the Permits Plus that we publish every other month, and it's a summary of 10 jurisdictions, maybe 12, I can't remember now, between 10 and 12 of the surrounding jurisdictions. So the metro area, and we were using the F word today, Fargo, it's all about Moorhead and Minnesota. And when we're on that side of the river, that's what we talk about. So, our members know that we don't bring up the F word when we're down in St. Paul. So, but please, we have the studies that can show the fluctuation in, building construction, remodeling, multifamily, commercial, and so on, and what is happening to housing. Right now, the cost, the home ownership rate is dramatically affected by these challenges that we face, as is the skilled labor force that we don't have right now. And so we're huge supporters of the academies on both sides of the river. We provided seed money on this side. We were part of the referendum to help the Moorhead Academy get established, and they have just a stellar building and program over there. They really did it right. So we're happy to be a part of that as well. So with that, we wish you the best of luck. Be sure to look us up if you need statistics, data, issues that we face, or names, or whatever it is. Please feel free to give us a call, no matter how it works out. But I think we're going to be sitting really good with any of you as, and thank you again for giving your time to run and to commit for public service. It's a big deal. So thank you.